A man with 0 days of political experience beat a field of seasoned politicians and won the most powerful office on earth. Stick with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how he did it. The branding, the bankruptcies, and the one reality show that built a president. Picture it, November 8th, 2016. Newsrooms across America fall silent. Every pollster, every pundit, every expert had it wrong. Because this was a man who had never served a single day in government or the military. He had survived 4 business bankruptcies, had knocked out 17 Republican rivals just to get on that stage, and even then, the forecasters gave him barely a 1 in 10 shot. Whatever you think of him, it's one of the most improbable rises in modern history, and it begins with a builder's son from Queens. This is the rise of Donald Trump. Donald John Trump was born on the 14th of June, 1946, in Queens, New York. His father, Fred Trump, was a self-made real estate developer who had built a fortune putting up middle-class apartments and homes across Brooklyn and Queens. The Trumps were wealthy, but their money was in the outer boroughs, far from the glamour of Manhattan. Donald was the 4th of 5 children, and by his own account, he was a handful. At 13, his parents sent him to the New York Military Academy to instill some discipline. He went on to the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, one of the best business schools in the country, and graduated in 1968. Then he joined the family business, and from the very start, he had something most young developers could only dream of: his father's money. Fred Trump gave his son loans, guarantees, and connections. Donald liked to describe it as a small loan of $1 million. Decades later, a New York Times investigation concludes he had actually received the equivalent of more than $400 million. This all was from his father over his lifetime. But whatever the exact figure, one thing is clear: he did not start from nothing. But for everything he was given, he still wanted something more. His father built in Brooklyn. Donald wanted Manhattan. In the late 1970s, he made his move. He took a crumbling hotel next to Grand Central Station, secured an enormous tax break from a near-bankrupt New York City, and partnered with the Hyatt hotel chain to transform it into the gleaming Grand Hyatt. It was his first major Manhattan deal, and it worked. Then came the building that would define him. In 1983, Trump Tower opened on 5th Avenue, a 58-story tower of dark glass and polished brass, with his name spelled out in giant gold letters above the door. It was his headquarters, his home, and most importantly, his brand. The name Trump now meant wealth, luxury, success. So he leaned into it. In 1987, he published the book The Art of the Deal. It was a runaway bestseller that sold him to America as the ultimate dealmaker. He bought Atlantic City casinos, an airline he named the Trump Shuttle, the famous Plaza Hotel, and a 200-foot yacht. By the end of the 1980s, Donald Trump wasn't just a developer. He was a character, the brash gold-plated symbol of American excess. And then it nearly all came crashing down. Trump had borrowed staggering sums to build his empire, and at the center of it sat the Trump Taj Mahal, an Atlantic City casino he financed with high-interest junk bonds and opened in 1990, calling it the 8th wonder of the world. But that wonder could never earn enough to cover its own debt. By the early 1990s, Trump's businesses were more than $3 billion in debt, and around $1 billion of that he had personally guaranteed. In 1991, the Taj Mahal filed for bankruptcy. Then others followed. Over the years, 4 of his companies would pass through Chapter 11. Though, notably, Trump himself never once filed for personal bankruptcy. He negotiated. He restructured. He handed banks pieces of his casinos and kept his name on the door. And that was the lesson that changed everything. Owning things was risky. Debt could sink you. But a name, a brand, that was almost impossible to bankrupt. So Trump pivoted. Instead of building towers with his own money, he began licensing his name to other people's buildings and stamping it on products, suits, ties, steaks, bottled water, a mortgage company, even a university. He was no longer just a builder. He was selling the idea of Donald Trump. To sell that idea, he had to stay famous. And Trump understood fame better than almost anyone alive. For decades, he was a fixture of the New York tabloids, the gossip pages breathlessly tracking his deals, his parties, and his very public divorces. He became a regular, unfiltered guest on Howard Stern's radio show. He popped up in movies and on television, from a cameo in Home Alone 2 to the ring at WrestleMania, where he once helped shave the head of WWE boss Vince McMahon in front of a roaring crowd. Most politicians spend years fighting for name recognition like that. Trump had spent a lifetime swimming in it. Then in 2004 came the moment that mattered most. NBC put him at the center of a reality show called The Apprentice. Every week, Donald Trump sat at the head of a gleaming boardroom, judged contestants competing for a job in his company, and delivered his catchphrase, "You're fired," to tens of millions of viewers who had never read a business page in their lives. The Apprentice presented Trump as the definitive American boss. Decisive, successful, completely in command. It ran for more than a decade, and arguably no tower he ever built did as much for his power as that television show. It made him, in the public imagination, the exact character he would one day run as, a blunt, successful outsider who got things done. Trump had flirted with politics for years, floating a possible run as far back as the late 1980s. But in 2011, he stepped onto the national political stage in earnest, becoming one of the loudest voices pushing the false claim that President Barack Obama had not been born in the United States. Obama was, in fact, born in Hawaii. But the episode kept Trump in the political conversation and made him a familiar name to a base of frustrated voters. Then, on the 16th of June 2015, he rode down the golden escalator in the lobby of Trump Tower and announced he was running for president of the United States. Almost no one in the political establishment took him seriously. They should have. The Republican field was enormous. 17 major candidates, including sitting senators, governors, and the son of a former president. On paper, Trump was the least qualified person in the race. He had never held any office at all, but he had things that others didn't. Total name recognition, a razor instinct for the media, and a blunt outsider message. Make America great again. That landed with millions of voters who felt forgotten. One by one, he knocked out the seasoned politicians, branding each with a nickname and dominating every single news cycle. By the summer of 2016, the first-time candidate had won the Republican nomination. Now only one obstacle remained: the general election. Hillary Clinton, a former First Lady, U.S. Senator, and Secretary of State, and one of the most experienced candidates ever to seek office. Nearly every poll, every forecast, every expert predicted she would win. Some gave Trump barely a 1 in 10 chance. On the night of the 8th of November 2016, the results began to come in. And slowly, state by state, the map turned red, where no one expected it to. Florida, then Ohio. Then one after another, the industrial states that were supposed to be an unbreakable Democratic wall, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, they all tipped his way. In the early hours of the morning, it was called. Donald J. Trump, the developer, the brand, the reality television host who had never spent a single day in public office, had been elected the 45th President of the United States. He had lost the popular vote. He had defied nearly every prediction in the country. And he had pulled off one of the greatest upsets in the history of American politics. The outsider had won. What he would do with that power, how he would change the country, and how the country would change in response, that's a story for another day. But if there's one thing his rise proves, it's that the most powerful seats in the world can go to the people you'd least expect. If you want to see how it keeps happening, the outsiders, the underdogs, the unlikely climbs to power, subscribe to StickToPower and hit that like button, because there are 100 more rises just like this one, and the next one's already on its way.